you see my screen okay? Just nod, Ed. Yes, wonderful. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Sam Crawford, and I am the author of a project called Trail Router. So, what is Trail Router? This is a very, very brief introduction. Trail Router is a running route planner, but with a difference. Now, obviously, there are a lot of running route planners out there. So why on earth do we need another running route planner? Not even running route planner, sorry. There's lots of navigation apps out there. Why do we need another one? So for some motivation, this is not me, but this is certainly how I sometimes feel. For my day job, when I'm not working on this side project, I travel quite a lot for work, often to places like Australia, New Zealand, South America, where there's big time zone differences between the UK and those destinations. So I often find myself awake at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm quite a keen runner, so I want to nip out for a run. But and what I'm looking for from a run is something like this. I like the trails. I like outdoors. Yeah, I enjoy the scenery, especially when I'm in a new place like Australia or New Zealand, and I've never been there before, or basically anywhere unfamiliar. So this is what I want, but if I'm not careful, this is what I frequently get. If I just if I just step out of the front door of the hotel and I go for a run. And I don't know about everyone else here, but I certainly don't like running along busy roads in amongst traffic. It's not very pleasant. So my historical solution to this was fire up the laptop, 4 a.m., bleary-eyed, jet-lagged, and I use one of the many route planners out there, something like Map My Run, Mapometer, Gmap Pedometer, there's loads of them. And I'd use that alongside something like Google Street View and draw out a route manually. And still, it's quite trial and error, but for me, the biggest thing, it was quite laborious and time consuming. So I started to wonder, is there a better way? So the problem statement, the genesis of Trail Router was me basically asking myself a question. Could I write something where I could ask it a question like this? Find me a running route of some specific distance, so 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, whatever, that starts and ends at maybe the same location and takes in as much greenery and nature as possible. Now, there's quite a few things to break down there, so we'll step through those in a minute. But crucially, I want to do it in a few seconds, and I don't want to have to fire up a laptop and manually draw it out myself. I want it in as few clicks as possible. So how hard could that possibly be? Turns out, actually, it is actually quite hard. I've been working on it for the best part of 9 or 10 months in the odd evenings and weekends here and there. But I'm pleased to say it's live. So back to our summary of what Trail Router is. Trail Router is, like I said, a running route planner, but it's a bit different to other ones. So you can see from the screenshot here on the right-hand side, and I'll play a couple of videos in a minute. It creates routes for you from exactly where you are. So if you fire up the app on your phone, you won't even have to click a single button. You won't have to press anything. It will suggest to you automatically, without touching a button, a selection of 5-kilometer running routes, all of which take in as much greenery and nature and water as possible. So you can see on the right-hand side, this is where I live in Greenwich, in London. It's just so happens that I'm quite lucky that Greenwich Park is right near me, and it happens to meet the 5-kilometer distance pretty much perfectly. But you can see it's plotted a route from my house around Greenwich Park and then back to my house. Like I say, it prefers greenery and nature and avoids busy roads wherever possible. So if I just step on to the next slide. So there's a 5-second video here which basically shows, which is going to show the user requesting a 20-kilometer running route, again in Greenwich here in London, and it will generate a selection of running routes. So there you go, selecting 20 kilometers. Click the button. So there you go. It's actually generated the first option here, and you can see it's produced a route which is 19.5 kilometers long. But you can see there's a little button here to tab through to some other routes. So I can click the next button, and there you go. It's given me another route which is now slightly over 20 kilometers. But you'll see both of those routes, they hug the River Thames here in the UK, in London, which is probably the biggest green or natural feature in the area to here. If I was next to a big forest, it certainly would have biased towards the forest. So if I move on to the next slide. So like I say, it also prefers greenery and nature. So to give you an idea of how this is adjustable, here is a route from, again, my house in London to my office in central London. Right now, in this scenario, we've got all greenery and nature preferences switched off. So it's the slider here is set to 0. And when I press play, what the video is going to show is adjusting the greenery preference up to 100%. And you can see that by default here, this route is actually following a big main road up into central London. It's actually, this is the most direct route, but it's also really quite busy traffic-wise and very polluted, and it's not a very pleasant run. So for a watch. So you can see I'm now at 40% greenery, and you can already see it started moving towards the river. It's slowly deviating from the main road, and we get up to 100% greenery, and it's now taken a significantly longer route. It's added about 30% to my overall distance, but it is now a much more pleasant route. So if we move on to the next slide, there's a number of other features in Trail Router. So one of the most common bugbears for one thing runners tend to dislike is something called out and backs, and that is a running route which takes you from point A to point B, and then via the inverse route straight back from point B to point A. It's not very, it's just very repetitive, and we tend to like variation. So Trail Router supports an option to avoid repetition. Now, the route on the left is actually an out and back route. It's going from my house to my office and then back home, and it's following the same path. So it's a bit hard to tell that it's actually two separate legs of this route. But on the right-hand side, we have the avoid repetition option selected, and you can see it's actually now crossed over the river, and it's taken us, again, a slightly longer route, in fact, a slightly shorter route even, but I've avoided all of that repetition. And the last example I wanted to show was hills. Some runners don't particularly like going over hills. Sometimes you just want a nice relaxing day. So Trail Router supports the option of avoiding hills where possible. So Greenwich, where I live in London, is quite a hilly area. And you can see by default going from point 1 here to the finish over here, you can see on the elevation chart at the bottom, there's around about 50 meters of ascent and descent in that route. But if I switch on avoid hills, as shown in the right-hand side, it takes me on a longer route, but it avoids almost all of the elevation gain and loss I had previously. So probably worth showing a couple of quick examples of successful runs this has taken me on. I've been out to New Zealand for work, and it found me this lovely trail up in the hills, literally just a kilometre or two outside of Wellington city centre. It's glorious. Found this lovely route on the North Downs in England. This is a field full of wild garlic. And then this is a message I got from a friend of mine literally yesterday, completely out by chance. He's just moved to a new area in the UK and is completely unfamiliar with it. He's a very keen runner as well. So he just followed the first 20-kilometre route that Trail Router suggested to him yesterday, and he sounded pretty happy with it. So in terms of status, where we are, Trail Router has been live since the end of last year. There's a web application, there's an Android app, there's an iOS app. It's completely free. There's no registration, no advertising, no tracking. You can log in if you want to save your routes, but you certainly don't have to. And last thing to mention is that Mapbox are very kindly supporting Trail Router by virtue of their community program as well, which means they're basically donating tile serving to the project as well at no cost, which is fantastic. So I think I'm pretty much out of time. So I will say thank you very much. I hope that all made sense.
That very much made sense. So, Sam, that was great. First of all, thank you. And I've got a couple of questions here for you. Can Trailfinder make a mountain bike orientated version using the right-of-way data sets to ID bridleways?
So cycling, be it road biking or mountain biking, is probably the #1 request I've received over the past few months. As you can imagine, I haven't done a cycling version yet, but yes, the data is certainly there to support it. I mean, under the hood, Trail Router is using Grasshopper, and saw Ed. I listened to the podcast the other week with Peter Carrick, which was very, very good. So yes, supporting cycling, be it road biking or mountain biking, is definitely possible, and it's also definitely on one of the items I'm thinking of. But I'm not a huge cyclist myself, so I don't know it as well as I know running. So I prefer to be a little bit cautious before I implement it. But yeah, all of the tagging data in OpenStreetMap is there to support it already.
And one from me, because I'm not a runner, but I've still experienced the almost identical problem when you want to go for a walk when you're staying in a strange city and you don't want to walk just the city streets. You want something that's a bit more rural and green. But presumably it makes no difference if you say I want to go for a 10-kilometer walk. That's the same thing as going for a 10-kilometer run. It just takes a little longer.
Yeah, it makes no difference at all. There's nothing in the OpenStreetMap tagging or any of my my logic which limits it to running purely.
Really neat, Sam. Really neat. Any more questions? Have I missed? Oh yeah. How do you host your tech? How do you make it performant enough?
Good question. I don't know how much detail to go into on this. There's so basically, like I mentioned earlier, it uses Grasshopper under the hood. Obviously with quite a lot of modifications for there's custom weightings in Grasshopper for a greenery index. There's a custom profile in there for trail running. There's custom weightings for hills and avoiding repetition, a whole bunch of other things. But in short, the whole thing, believe it or not, is hosted on a single server, which is the server's hosted in Germany with a company called Hetzner. It requires a lot of resources, and this is one of the things because it's hosting the data for the entire planet. So it requires a server with 256 gigabytes of RAM. But the whole thing costs around about £100 or maybe 110, 115 euros a month to host. But it is possible to do it on a single server with if you do it carefully. But yes, it's a combination of Grasshopper, PostGIS, and obviously underpinning everything is OpenStreetMap data. It just wouldn't be possible without OpenStreetMap.
And I think you said that Mapbox are sponsoring the hosting or something.
Yeah, not in a direct monetary way, but Trail Router is part of the community program, which basically means if I go over the free allowance, because I'm not paying Mapbox anything, if I go over the free allowance, then they don't charge me. So I haven't done that yet, but I'm getting pretty close.
And the regular question that Stephen F. Feldman always asks: how do you plan to monetize this, and if so, how?
It's a good question, and at the moment, no plans to monetize it whatsoever. I mean, part of I didn't put it in the slides at the beginning, but frankly, part of my frustration with the existing route planners out there was that if I just wanted to get up and go, then I first had to create an account, register, share my details via Facebook or Gmail or whatever, and it was just a big old hassle when I really just wanted to go run somewhere nice. So I want my objective here is to make something very clean, very simple, with as few barriers for users as possible. And yeah, there's it's certainly, its usage and its cost is certainly a level at the moment where I can support it without without needing to monetize it or put advertising on it or anything like that yet. If it massively increases in usage, then maybe my costs will go up and that will have to change. But right now, no plans whatsoever.
Okay, Sam, that's brilliant. And I have to just say that whilst you were talking, I downloaded it and it immediately offered me a great route for a green walk around my home area. So well